The air in the cabin felt heavy, thick with unspoken fears and the tension of knowing we were trapped, waiting, hoping that Jake's plan would work. Sleep was impossible. I kept drifting in and out of restless thoughts, images of the black SUV and the faceless men after Jake playing over and over in my mind. I could feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. When dawn finally broke through the trees, I heard Jake moving around in the living room, pacing again. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and found him standing by the window, staring out into the woods. His jaw was clenched, his face tight with worry. "He'll be here soon," Jake muttered, his voice low. "Victor, we'll know by today if this is going to work." I nodded, feeling the pit in my stomach grow deeper. "And if it doesn't?" Jake didn't answer right away. His silence told me everything. If Victor didn't help us disappear, if this plan fell apart, the men hunting Jake would find us, and they wouldn't leave witnesses. Before I could push him further, there was a knock at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Jake's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw the tension in his face harden into something more dangerous. Without a word, he grabbed the gun he had stashed under the couch and approached the door cautiously. I held my breath, gripping the back of the chair as Jake slowly opened the door. Standing on the other side was a man who looked nothing like I'd expected. Victor was tall and broad, with a cold, calculating face. His eyes were sharp and unfeeling, taking in every detail of the room with a practiced detachment. He didn't say a word as he stepped inside, his presence sending a chill through the small cabin. "So, this is her?" Victor asked, his voice a low rumble as he glanced at me. "The girl you dragged into this mess?" Jake's jaw tightened. "Leave her out of it." Victor smirked, but his eyes didn't soften. He looked at me, studying me like I was just another piece in some game he was playing. "You've got yourself in deep, haven't you?" I glared at him, my fear and frustration boiling just beneath the surface. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know Jake was involved in anything until he showed up at my door. Victor raised an eyebrow. "And yet, here you are. Funny how that works." "Enough," Jake cut in, his voice tense. "Did you bring what we need?" Victor sighed, as if this whole thing was an inconvenience. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, tossing it onto the table. "Everything you asked for. New identities, travel documents, cash. You can disappear, just like you wanted." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of uncertainty. We had the means to run, to escape, but I knew this wouldn't be a clean break. Nothing about this was simple. Jake stepped forward and grabbed the envelope, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you." Victor held up a hand. "Not so fast. You know this doesn't come without a price." Jake stiffened, his expression darkening. "I figured." Victor's smirk returned, colder than before. "You owe me, Jake, and someday I'll collect. But for now, you've got what you need. Just remember, if you mess this up, I won't be there to save you." Jake nodded, his face hard as stone. "We won't mess it up." Victor glanced at me again, his eyes narrowing. "Good luck, sweetheart. You'll need it." With that, he turned and left, disappearing into the woods as quickly as he had arrived. The cabin fell silent again, the tension still thick between us. "We can leave tonight," Jake said quietly, flipping through the documents Victor had given him. "We'll head to the safe house first, then cross the border by morning." I sat down, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around me. "And then what, Jake? We just keep running for the rest of our lives? Looking over our shoulders every day?" Jake sighed, sitting across from me. "I don't know, Sarah, but this is the only way I can protect you." I stared at him, my emotions swirling in a storm of confusion. Protect me? This was his mess, his life that had spiraled out of control. And yet, here I was, tangled up in it, ready to leave everything behind. But was this the life I wanted? Running, hiding, never feeling safe? Before I could speak, A loud crash came from outside, followed by the sound of tires skidding on gravel. My heart stopped. "They found us," Jake muttered, his face going pale. I shot to my feet. "What? Already? How?" "I don't know," Jake said, grabbing the gun again. "But we need to go. Now." Panic surged through me as we scrambled to gather the few belongings we had. I could hear footsteps approaching the cabin, the sound of voices barking orders in the distance. Whoever was out there wasn't here to talk. Jake grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the back door. "Come on. We'll take the car and drive into the woods. It's the only chance we've got." But before we could make it out, the front door burst open, and 3 men stormed inside. They were armed, and their faces were cold, ruthless. I recognized one of them, the driver of the black SUV I had seen parked outside my house. Jake pushed me behind him, his gun raised, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew we were outnumbered. One of the men stepped forward, smirking. "You really thought you could run from us, Jake? Did you really think disappearing with some fake documents would work?" Jake didn't answer. His hand shook slightly, but he didn't lower the gun. The man's eyes shifted to me, his smirk growing wider. "So this is the girl you've been hiding with. I bet she didn't know what she was getting into, did she?" I clenched my fists, every nerve in my body screaming at me to do something. But there was nothing I could do. I was helpless. "You've made this too easy, Jake," the man said, his voice dripping with malice. "All we wanted was the evidence. Hand it over, and we'll let you walk out of here alive. But if you don't—" Jake's face hardened. "I don't have it. I told you that." The man's smirk faded, and his eyes turned cold. "Wrong answer." Before I could react, one of the men lunged at Jake, knocking the gun from his hand. Chaos erupted. Jake tried to fight back, but they overpowered him easily, pinning him to the floor as the leader turned his attention to me. "Where's the evidence?" he demanded, his voice harsh. "I don't know," I shouted, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know anything." The man grabbed my wrist, pulling me close. "You're lying. If Jake doesn't have it, you do." I struggled against him, but his grip was like iron. My mind raced, fear clouding my thoughts, when suddenly I heard a shout from behind me. "Let her go." Jake had freed himself and was charging at the man, his face twisted with anger and desperation. The 2 men clashed, and in the chaos, I managed to break free, stumbling back toward the door. But before I could run, I heard the deafening crack of a gunshot. Everything went still. The world seemed to slow down as I turned, my breath caught in my throat. Jake was on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. The leader of the men stood over him, gun still in hand, his face calm and emotionless. "No!" I screamed, rushing to Jake's side. His eyes were wide with shock, his breath shallow as he clutched his side. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered, his voice weak. I tried. Tears blurred my vision as I held him, panic surging through me. "Don't you dare leave me, Jake. Don't you dare." But I knew it was too late. The men stood around us, watching with cold indifference as the life drained from Jake's body. "Tell Victor this is done," one of the men said, holstering his gun. "We've taken care of his problem." The others nodded, turning and walking out of the cabin as if nothing had happened. I sat there, holding Jake in my arms, my mind numb with shock. He was gone. Days later, I found myself back in Ashton Grove, staring at the house I had once called home. Everything had changed. Jake's death, his sacrifice, had left me with more questions than answers. Victor had kept his end of the deal, ensuring that the men hunting Jake wouldn't come after me. But at what cost? I still couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Jake had died trying to protect me, but his past lingered, like a shadow I could never fully escape. As I stood on my porch, I glanced down at the envelope Victor had sent me. Inside were new documents, a new name, a new life. a chance to disappear for good. But as I held it in my hands, I realized something. I didn't want to run anymore. I didn't want to disappear. I wanted answers. Would you stay and fight after losing someone you loved? Or would you disappear to escape the past? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more stories. You won't believe what happens next.